Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Each episode, you'll dive into conversations with top entrepreneurs, visionaries, and business leaders, unlocking the secrets to building profitable relationships that drive growth and success. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, presented by LeDuc Entertainment. Today, we are joined by Brad Swonetz, a photographer and creative director. Brad, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Can we start off by you telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your work?
Yeah, so I've been a photographer for a long time now. Right when I got out of college, I became a photo assistant and then went out on my own pretty quickly after that. And I've been shooting everything from editorial stuff, magazine stuff, and to advertising, and kind of got to travel a lot, got to meet a lot of interesting people through it all, and then through it, I also became a creative director about 8 years ago. Worked for companies like Zappos and the Walking Company and a couple other companies. And so now I am doing my own thing again and shooting, and I have a little branding agency as well. So yeah.
Now, do you prefer the creative directing side or the doing your own thing side? Which kind of speaks more to you as an artist, I guess?
Well, they kind of both go together, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, creative directing, doing my company's called That Branding Company. I'm still a creative director, basically. Right. I own it, but I'm also creative directing there. The photography is kind of goes hand in hand with it as well. But I like both of them. I really do like both of them. They're different outlets, kind of ending in the same place a lot of the time. But I love shooting. I love being out and being with people and connecting and meeting interesting people. That to me is super, super fun. But I love working with teams too. I love, making something out of nothing, with, taking an idea, creating a brand with it, and then getting it to a point where it's online and you're selling stuff, whether it's yourself or whether it's a clothing brand or whatever it is. I just like the process.
Right. Can you tell me a little bit about where your artistic career began when you first started getting interested in the arts?
Yeah. So it's kind of a funny story. I mean, as a kid, I really loved art. I took drawing lessons with a really good friend of mine over at his house. We started in 4th grade, right? Just loved drawing. But I took a drafting class my last few years of college or high school, and also ceramics. Loved that stuff too. And I thought maybe I'd be, going to architecture or something like that. But then I decided to go in as pre-med to college. And I was drawing like crazy in my notes instead of actually taking the notes. A friend of mine said, "Hey, your drawings are really good. You might want to just do art since you're not really paying attention here." And I said, "Okay, well, let me give it a try." And I took a sculpture class for my first art class elective, and I just loved it. I thought it was amazing. I didn't get out of the studio, honestly, that quarter of school, and then I just kind of knew it was for me, and just kept sculpting a lot. Worked in metal and fabrics, and we even did bronze casting and stuff like that. And I had no interest in photography, to be honest. I didn't really pick up a camera until my last quarter of college. And when I did pick up the camera, I was like, why hadn't I done this before? Because it was amazing. I mean, it was a long time ago. So it was black and white film, right? Kind of ages me there. But I never came out of the darkroom that quarter. And I asked my teacher's assistant, I said, hey, how can I do this for a living? And he said, well, go to LA and become a photo assistant. And 2 weeks later, I moved to LA and I got a job as an assistant. About 2 days later, just happened to get a photo assisting job. And that took me to New York as well, where I lived in New York and worked with some travel and fashion photographers there, and just kind of learned through. I think I wrote it down one time. I think I assisted for about 75 different photographers.
Wow.
At that point, it was all film, and so people needed assistance everywhere. So whether you were in LA or New York, you kind of stayed busy. And so, through word of mouth, you ended up working with a lot of different people. And I saw everyone's different style. And I got to kind of pick and choose from what from their styles and go, oh, that works with me. That works with me. And then I went out on my own. And I don't know if you want me to keep talking about it.
Please.
But yeah, the way I first got my meetings with magazines was going to the Barnes and Noble in Union Square in New York. And I had my first cell phone. It was like the Samsung, we called it a Snicker bar phone because it looked like a Snicker bar. And I would I'd get a coffee, go through all the stacks of magazines and pick out all the magazines that I thought I could shoot for, which was everything at that point. I just thought, oh, I can take pictures, so I can shoot for everybody, right? So I'd just pick up these giant stacks of magazines and then cold call. I'd just cold call the magazines and say, hey, can I talk to your photo editor? And, whether I was living in New York at the time or in LA, I'd say, I'd love to have a meeting with you. And that's how I got my first meetings in the magazine industry, was just cold calling from that Barnes and Noble floor,
Wow.
So.
And can you tell me, you mentioned that you started out in sculpture.
Yeah.
What kind of influence did the things that you learned with that sculpting background, did that have any influence on your approach to photography?
I think kind of just fine art in general. I mean, I think sculpture as well, but, composition wise, I was taught so much composition through it all.
Right.
And I also think at the beginning of my career with photography, I definitely looked at it much more as a composition than a moment in history. I think there's some ways of looking at photography, and I was looking at shape and composition and light. I still do very, very closely, and I think that's because of the fine art background. I think if you go to a photography school, you learn that too. But I think the sculpture and fine art I wasn't thinking in terms of photography as much as composition, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
And I'm wondering, you've been collaborating with all of these high profile companies, and I took a look at your, I took a look at some of your portfolio before we began the interview, and I saw some pretty familiar faces on there, and so you're working with high profile companies, high profile clients and people. How do you approach that? How does your approach differ when you're facing something like that versus when you're kind of, out and traveling and capturing little candid moments? I mean, your genres, you span several different genres of photography. How does your approach differ?
I think Let me think about that. So I think
I don't know. That's a
that,
bit of a loaded question, right?
yeah. So, I mean, between the two, working with people and then traveling are quite different in the way I approach it, because working with people, it's so much about connecting with that person, right? And really, I'm super interested in people. I'm super interested, in
Right.
what you do. I'm super interested in, whether it was for Scientific American, let's say, and it was a scientist. I'm so interested in what they're doing. They're changing the world, and then I'd shoot for something else and it'd be a celebrity, and I would be as interested in them as I was the scientist. I just love people, and I think that I always said about my portraits, it's more about the conversation than it is the photography at that point, because you're just trying to learn about that person, and through that you get much more interesting photos and much more open photos, right? With the travel stuff, I always love finding the beauty in the mundane. Uh, a lot of, you can make beautiful landscapes and or shoot beautiful landscapes, and I love doing that as well. But I always love finding, weird stuff like a ladder. There was one picture I had on my website for a long time that it was a ladder in a pool, right? And just, or a palm. There's a shot I took of a palm tree, and it's just a palm tree in the middle of nowhere, and just these weird, with a wall and gravel. It just didn't look like it should be there. So I like finding stuff that doesn't seem like it belongs sometimes too.
What inspired, I mean, obviously you're very passionate about what you do. What inspired this passion? Where do you think this passion for visual storytelling and communicating things in a visual medium comes from?
It's a good question too. I think I've just always loved looking at things and making meaning out of them.
Yeah.
And just, it's so much fun as well. It's so much fun to be creating and moving. I love movement, right? And with photography, you're moving all the time. And I think it's also, I love making people, especially with portraiture, just when somebody sees a good portrait of themselves and has that moment where they're super happy and they're like, oh man, I look so great. I love that reaction, that energy, and that like collaboration. It makes me super excited and happy, but I think, I don't know, I've always loved art. Like I said, in fourth grade, I was drawing. I mean, I was drawing before that, but I was already, into it. And I think it's just kind of, just creating is super fun.
I'm curious. I want to touch on something you said. You said with photography, you're moving all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really interesting, because I think most people wouldn't think of photography as something where you would be moving all the time, because I think most people think of photography, they think, okay, you stand over there and we're going to be real still,
Yeah.
I mean, can you explore that thought and that notion a little bit more about movement?
No, I like that, because it wasn't always like this for me, right? So when I first started, I was shooting a lot for Fortune and Forbes and things like that. And it was just, at the time, it was more locked down. I had a medium format film camera, and it wasn't as mobile. They're huge cameras, right? And so you would put it on a tripod a lot, and kind of, the lighting would be all perfect. There'd be, hair lights, there'd be all kinds of stuff going on, but the person didn't move that much, at least in the way I shot back then. And it served me. But as soon as I started taking the camera off the tripod more, and I think it changed a little bit with digital, because I was using a smaller camera, and also it changed as digital got even more advanced, because the focusing systems are amazing. The the low light is amazing. Everything about them are great. I still love film, but it freed you up. And so I actually started, and I grew up surfing constantly. And I was always moving. I was always doing the sport or surfing or skating. And I realized as soon as I started moving more with my photography, not only was I getting way more angles and way more variations, and usually some of the time the variation that I thought might not work, but I just went for it, was the best one, right?
Wow.
As soon as I started thinking, and it's going to kind of sound cheesy a little bit, but I started thinking of it a little bit, and probably people will give me a lot of flack for this that know me, but I've started thinking about it a little bit more like surfing, where it's a flow and you're moving with it. And I started getting way better photos. I think a lot of it had to do with, also I started shooting for Vogue at one point, L'Uomo Vogue. It's an Italian Vogue, and the photo editor wanted things to look way grittier than and more real than what I was shooting previously with all the light, and that was a moment where it freed me up as well.
Right.
And so now and even if you're on tripod, you're still moving throughout the day. You're not sitting at a desk, you're carrying gear, I really feel like as a human, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I need to move all the time. So
I have a multi-part question for you that I'm really interested in. And
okay.
it's, I guess, one is, where do you find inspiration?
Mm-hmm.
2, do you ever struggle finding inspiration? And 3, if you do struggle finding inspiration, how do you work through that?
Okay, so the first one is, where do I find inspiration, right? I think that's from just reading, looking at other photos, looking at other design, just being part of pop culture, watching films, other artists really inspire me. Also taking walks in nature and things like that, obviously, while you're traveling and things like that, that inspires me. There's a lot of time where it's hard to find inspiration. Not especially when I'm on a shoot. I wouldn't say that, but in daily life, right? And I think that again is like movement, meditation, just finding something online that inspires me. Again, watching film, that's kind of the same as what gives me inspiration, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, there are definitely times, and if any creative says there isn't a time that they're having a hard time finding inspiration, I mean, maybe they're not lying, but I'd be surprised. And then the third part, sorry, remind me what the
was
third
just,
part was.
I mean, how do you work through those, I guess, that writer's block or whatever you want to, those times when you struggle to find inspiration, how do you work through it? But
I think
like
sometimes, I think one other thing is sometimes put it down for a while. If you're really stuck, and you're really, really trying hard, put it down, go do something else, and you'll probably figure it out while you're doing something else.
Yeah. I'd like to ask a little bit more of a tech question.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this might be a big loaded question, so I apologize if it is. How do you approach lens selection?
I don't approach it very much.
Really?
So I have my 24-70. So I shoot Canon mostly.
Mm-hmm.
But when I shoot either film or I also shoot a Fuji medium format camera too, that I've been shooting a little bit, and it's amazing, 100 megapixel camera, and it's beautiful. But I used to be a prime lens guy. And then when I went to Canon, because I was always medium format prime lenses. And when I went to Canon, I bought a 24-70 with it. And that, I think I've had maybe 4 or 5 of them since. That is my go-to lens. And it's, I don't have to think about it. It's 24-70, and I use it wide when I shouldn't sometimes, and it gives me stuff that I wouldn't normally get, right? So that's another kind of movement thing, is I'm even moving with the lens, right? And then I shoot a 70-200 too a lot. And I mean, if you're asking me how to figure out lens selection, I mean, I always try to not distort the face too much, right? So I'll go with a longer lens if I'm going in close to it for a portrait. But those 2 lenses, I barely ever put a prime lens on anymore.
Really? I mean, it's this is kind of another techie question maybe that I'm curious about.
Yeah.
Has social media, I mean, forced any changes in the photography space, or
yeah.
especially when it comes to marketing?
For sure. So, I was working for corporations as a creative director, right? And we saw a lot of change. A lot of UGC stuff, right? Is it really works? It really works, and it's not always the quality that's coming out of what we're used to, right? So for a lot of photographers and a lot of creatives in general, it's a hard pill to swallow when everyone can do it, and sometimes the stuff that performs, depending on your company or depending on your brand, sometimes the stuff that performs is that UGC stuff shot with an iPhone in not great light.
Right.
Maybe someone's walking in a park or walking, their dog or whatever. And yeah, it's changed things a lot. And I know a lot of people that will shoot, the high end stuff and then shoot with the iPhone too, to cover that,
And I'm curious as well, and I mean, this may be another one of those loaded questions. I've seen like I've thrown you a lot of those. I'm sorry, but do you think AI is going to have a big impact in the photography space? Like, where do you see the photography field heading, maybe in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah. I don't know, to be honest. I don't. I definitely think AI is going to have a big impact. It already has, I think. I don't know. It's a question I've been asking myself, and I actually had this discussion with somebody yesterday. And it's getting really good, right? It's still not quite there, and I'm trying to figure out whether people are still going to want that experience, right? And I think they will want the experience, and I still think people want it to look real. But it's definitely real.
Yeah. Well, I've got a question. You've talking about how you rock climb, you surf, you run, you travel, you kind of do all these sort of very active things. We've talked a little bit about how that motion and thing applies to your photography, but you also practice yoga. And I'm wondering, what influence, if any, does yoga have on your approach to photography? Are there any lessons that you've been able to take from there and bring in?
That's a good question. I mean, other than being limber, no. I think yoga and meditation and all the stuff that helps you relax your nervous system is a good thing for a stressful situation, right? And not that photography is always stressful, but it's something you've got to capture, right? And photo shoots can can cause anxiety or nervousness or whatever it is. And anything that teaches you how to calm your brain, your nervous system is a good thing I think it's with any job, whether it's photography or everything has its stressors, right? So I think just, anything that can mellow you out and teach you to breathe. I mean, I don't know about you, but there's times where I will catch myself not breathing at all and go, oh, geez, why do you think you're feeling anxious? Because you're actually not giving your brain oxygen right now. And I can't tell you how many times I've had to tell other teammates and be like, hey, breathe.
So I'm wondering if there is maybe a telltale sign, I guess, and this is what I'm curious about. I mean, you're capturing these moments that are, some of them candid, some of them, kind of portrait and set up in a studio. Is there a moment, or is there a sign that when you look back on your work and you say, wow, I really captured the essence of that person? I really captured their sort of, not just their image, but their sort of soul in this photograph?
Are there any moments that I feel like that?
Yeah.
I hope most of them, but no. I don't know. Yeah.
Or like if you're looking over maybe like a batch of photos and you go, 30, however many, I have no idea how many you take in a general session, but that where you look over the batch of them and say, this is the one where I really captured the essence of that person.
So you're asking me what is the actual question? Are you asking when I'm editing, do I see that, or?
Yeah. I mean, that's, I guess, what is the moment that that, like, when you see it, what is the moment, or what are you looking for that lets you know, or is it something intangible,
Yeah. Another good question, because it's something I think as I've looked at thousands and thousands of photos, right? And I take a lot on a shoot. I think a lot of the time you see it in their eyes. There's some kind of, I don't know if you want to call it a sparkle or what it is, but you see, and maybe it's something I just see. I'm not sure but there are usually those out of 1,000. There's like 2 that I'm just super excited about, and it's they're engaged and they're really there. Sorry, it's a hard question to.
No, it definitely is.
Yeah.
It's just that there's that something special about it.
Yeah, and I can't really describe it until I see it.
Right.
Yeah.
When you think back on, all of the photographs you've taken, all of the high profile, clients that you've worked for, that you photographed, is there a memorable story that really stands out that you could share with us?
Yeah. So I think one of my favorite shoots, I was shooting a really, really famous rock star. And the rock star came to the back of my computer, and I mean, in my eyes, well, let me go on with the story. Comes to the back of my computer. This is after digital's already around, and he goes, he's looking and looking. He goes, Brad, these are great, but you got to make me look like a rock star. And I said, man, you're like the definition in the dictionary. You are, I look at rock star and that's you. And it just made me realize that, I mean, everyone that I take pictures of, or everyone in general, still feels like they're just human, and they're just a person, and they're probably just like their 20-year-old self or 18-year-old self walking down the street before they became whatever they became, whether it's you as a host, whether it's me as a photographer, whether it's him as a rock star, or, skateboarder, or whoever it is, everyone just feels like themselves. And it's like kind of, everyone's got imposter syndrome a little bit. And it just that was really kind of opened my eyes to everything, and was like, oh, okay, everyone feels
Right.
like they're, like this.
Right. Well, Brad, this has been an awesome, awesome conversation. If anybody out there listening would like to look at your work, would like to see your portfolio, if any business owners would like to work with you, where can people find you?
Well, right now, my website is just bradswonetz.com. Pretty simple. And they can find me there. They can find me on Instagram, Facebook, all the channels.
Brad, this was awesome. Thank you so, so much for coming on the show.
Thanks a lot, Adrian. Awesome.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Partnerships for Profit, presented by LeDuc Entertainment. Brad, thank you so much again.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.